take those guys on, we take the church on, and we take God on if he wills, in order to stop segregation in Hungary. And what we're doing is we're going against localities where desegregation is feasible. This means that we're actually litigating in all the major cities around the country. And what I do when I'm not in Hungary, I work for the legal network of independent experts in the non-discrimination field. This is a looks network that is related to the European Commission. Renata is a member and I'm a member as well. We look at reports of compliance of member states with the non-discrimination directives. And as a grant coordinator for race and Roma in brackets, I have authored a number of reports that deal with the issue of segregation and what we can do about this. I was very tempted to go along the line that Julius was suggesting, because I have very strong views on what is good in the European Court of Human Rights jurisprudence, and especially that jurisprudence on discrimination and what is bad. Actually, Equality Directive, if we read it together with ICER, the International Covenant or Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, especially General Common Number 19, which deals with segregation, please look it up, and also with a number of other instruments, but more lately under the Horvath and Fish versus Hungary judgment. You may have heard from Renata that this is a step in the right direction from the European Court of Human Rights. I think it's a huge step, because it actually says no matter what sort of segregation Roma are experiencing, whether it is misdiagnosis of non-disabled Roma children in special schools established for the disabled, this is what misdiagnosis is, and this is what DH and others and Horvath and Fish focused on. So no matter what type of segregation or discrimination we talk about, if it's a long-standing tradition or practice, member states must take positive action measures to end it. That instrument is that they do not in fact differentiate between direct and indirect discrimination. If you see the definition of discrimination under the European Convention, then you see that there is only one definition there. And direct and indirect discrimination both fall under the same definition. They can both be justified according to objective, proportional, blah, blah, blah criteria. The problem with that is that then you do not know what is the bigger harm. And how does segregation feature in this scheme, when segregation is the most vicious form of discrimination, and you cannot not notice it. It's not the US, it's the European Union. We do not need to show intent to show that there is segregation. Okay, that's an extremely important difference between the US and the European Union. There is a reason why all the European Union member states are parties and signatories to ICER, which says spontaneous segregation is also illegal. It is almost as bad, but illegal under ICER. The US didn't sign up to that because they believe that discrimination can only be intentional. If it's not intentional, then it's not unlawful. It may be morally unjust, but it's not unlawful. So what this teeny-weeny organization that I work for in Hungary has done, it has taken cases to prove that spontaneous segregation is illegal. And the funny thing on the civil law, because all these cases are taken under civil law, because the Racial Equality Directive is transposed into the civil laws of the member states. So you take an action and you say, hello, you know, the general principles of civil law apply to these cases, due diligence to avoid any harm on the tort or whatever civil rights law. Like most of the cases that you have seen before the European Court of Human Rights were not argued on the basis of the Racial Equality Directive, because they predated the transposition of that directive into national laws. So the thing is, the first case that was clearly argued on the basis of the transposed Racial Equality Directive is Horvath and Fish. So when you read that case, that is something that will help you do your cases at home, and beware that you cannot escape the domestic ordeal of proceeding before civil courts anymore because of the Racial Equality Directive and its transposition into domestic law. It could be escaped in DH and others because there was basically no remedy for segregation at the time in the Czech Republic. Okay, as far as money in it. Nobody else is giving money for Roma rights litigation other than George Soros. Nobody. And even within our side, it's been hotly debated recently whether money should be given for litigation for Roma rights. Well, if the money goes, you won't have the cases. You may have noticed that DH, Orsús, and Kishenborvet came about as designed, planned actions. They took 8 years to get to a final judgment. This is not a small investment. I mean, you need to upkeep the organizations that are doing such cases. So you're talking 200,000, 300,000, 400,000 euros that these cases cost. And then the legal costs that you recover in Kishenborvet, you may remember, 4,500. So, it's not a really worthy investment in a way, but, if the only donor goes from this region, then there won't be any cases left. Contribution to this wonderful evening. To Jack Greenberg, who was also a mastermind behind the Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka case. He came to this region and he studied the differences between the US civil rights movement and the Roma rights movement, and especially with regard, he did it with regard to the Roma education cases. And what he found was that there are great differences in how the communities operate. One of the differences is that although there was extreme segregation in the US, members of the African American communities always had a job, and they were actually living on the money they earned. They were not excluded from the labor market, and many times, as Judith Sira points out from the Roma Education Fund, they were working for white families. Remember this book and film, The Help?
Yes.
How they actually saw the example of how the white families actually run and could follow that example. They were part of the intricate web of white society. Now these two things are not given in our countries. The Roma are pushed out of the labor market and they are pushed out of white societies. They are completely pushed out of white society. The only example they see of white societies is Latin American soap dramas on TV. Not kidding. Not kidding. And then the majority Hungarians are wondering why many Roma children are called Lucienda and Santos and Orlando and whatever. Because that is the only access to middle class, so-called middle class societies.
No, I appreciate it. And it's when you were distinguishing the U.S. from Hungary and Europe in general, that in fact the proof of intent to discriminate, which is a very problematic aspect of the U.S. civil rights law, is not present in the European context.
It's not in the international context.
Right. Yeah.
But you're not signing those international treaties.
No.
Or you have your.
Whatever. I mean, I'm not responsible for what
Not you.
signed or not. But this is a very important. This is a very important point, because I hope that the evening will end on some optimistic notes. And this is a very optimistic note. Now that doesn't mean you're going to immediately get it all right, but actually it does give you a tool that is not present. And the tools that were used in the U.S. were, actually the argument was made that it shouldn't